My name is Stacy, and I've been reading from my collection of science fiction stories, Tales of the Bizzare and Unnatural, sometimes 2 or 3 in a half-hour segment. We'll see how many this time, perhaps 2 at least. All right, the first one is titled Glass, Handled with Care. Gary Feldman is a businessman, dedicated to the various ways of turning an honest dollar. The year is 2079, and earning a living is no less difficult now in a time of employment scarcity than it was in 1979. For decades, economists had both lauded and decried the intrusion of robotics into the workplace. This began long before the age when computers came into wide use in corporate settings for the first time. Electrical engineering culled out the telephone operator long before voice recognition systems had come into being. The rise of the automobile culled out the blacksmith. The invention of the printing press culled out the scribes. The combine and the tractor-drawn plow have displaced countless farm laborers who, in turn, migrated to the cities to work in factories, mills, and slaughterhouses there. Feldman had discovered a profitable economic niche almost by accident. With nothing more than a sharp proposal and a bank loan to get him off the ground, Feldman started a company that sold precision-made glassware for scientific laboratories. He had 3 craftsmen and a full-time secretary on his payroll. To eliminate shipping costs, Feldman would deliver the merchandise himself. He drove a large van to various cities, from one drug manufacturer to another. Laboratory equipment was fragile and often had to be replaced. He made 3 deliveries. He made these deliveries to put a personal stamp on his product. He wanted the purchasers to know that they weren't merely talking to a salesman, they were speaking to the owner of the company. Whenever he made such a delivery, Feldman backed the truck up to the loading dock. At an adjacent dock, the robots would be at work unloading pallets of steel drums containing a great variety of chemicals. Robots outfitted in various ways would receive these pallets inside the building where these bulk agents were identified and routed to one of countless stations. His truck now parked in front of the loading dock, Feldman jumped down from the cab and rushed over to the call box attached to a metal girder. He pressed the button and began speaking immediately. "Yeah, sorry to interrupt your card game, but I've got some important merchandise to drop off. The name's Feldman." "Of course, Mr. Feldman. Please come up to our accounting office and we can take care of the paperwork. Do you know the way?" "Yes, miss. I've been here a number of times now." "I'll just buzz you in then." "Thank you, miss." He stepped up to the door, monitored continuously by a video camera. A solenoid was triggered and made the sound no one cares to hear, an unpleasant official sound, precisely what is wanted. In this vast warehouse, the activity of machines was much more diverse and intense. The entire building was the space of 10 high school gymnasiums. 3 people actually supervised this facility, which operated 24 hours each day, 7 days a week, to produce the medicines we all buy. Feldman trotted up 2 flights of stairs to the accounting office. He wanted to get this done as quickly as possible. Somehow the automation of a chemical manufacturing plant a factory where thousands of different drugs and medicines were produced and packaged, one of the most profitable and secretive businesses in the world, just didn't sit right with him. Anyone who is hired in this world of chemical engineers, organic chemists, microbiologists, and everyone else has to sign a contract, which includes a non-disclosure, non-compete clause, barring a former employee from working for one of their competitors. And since jobs are scarce everywhere, they always sign given the chance. Even the fast food industry uses this tactic. Once on the second landing, he stepped up to the single available door along a wide walkway which apparently led nowhere. He went into the office, and the woman he had spoken with on the intercom greeted him as he walked over to her desk. "What happened to Jennifer?" he said. Jennifer's replacement was around the same age, mid-20s, but unlike Jennifer, she was not self-consciously glamorous. She had an unexpected medical condition, the woman said. Then she stood up and said, "My name's Nancy O'Connor, Mr. Feldman. A pleasure to meet you." She smiled and stuck out her hand. "Nice to meet you, Miss O'Connor. I expect then you'll be doing the honors?" "I will be, that's right," she said, as though applying her signature to an invoice were an unusually fine moment. "You must not see these too often," Feldman said, handing her the invoice, a business form in triplicate. Miss O'Connor took the form and said, "These are such old-timey things now." "Yeah, I'm a dying breed, a man who runs his own business, top to bottom." She signed her name and returned the triplicate form to him, and Feldman in turn tore away the top sheet and handed it to her. "Now then, about the unloading. A fellow named Stewart usually helps me. Stu took the day off. One of his kids got hurt real bad at school, but I can help you. How long will it take?" "Oh, hardly more than a few minutes." "Let's go," she said, putting on a cardigan that had been draped over her chair. The two of them went down the 2 flights of metal stairs. "I'll get the forklift and meet you out front," she said. "I'm surprised you know how to run one of those," he said. "My father was a contractor," she said. "He taught me how to do a lot of things." And Feldman went out to his truck, unlocked the rear sliding panel door, and rolled it up. Then he waited, standing with his hands in his trouser pockets. Soon the bay door opened, and Nancy appeared perched on top of a forklift. She guided the machine out to the van and maneuvered the 2 arms of the lift beneath one of the wooden pallets, raised it gently a few inches from the floor of the truck, then backed away slowly with the load and took it into the building. When she removed the last load, she pulled away from the truck and shut off the propane-powered engine. She walked up to Feldman as he was rolling down the rear door. "That about does it then," she said. "You handle that machine like an old-timer." "Thanks. Dad let me play on these things when I was a kid." Feldman laughed as he imagined a forklift next to their Christmas tree in the living room. "See you next time around, Nancy." "Bye, Mr. Feldman. Drive safe." He wanted to say, "Please call me Gary," but then thought better of it. He simply smiled, already looking forward to the next time when he would see her. Then he got back into his truck and pulled away from the loading dock just as another 18-wheeler arrived without anyone behind the wheel. And this next story is titled Jim, My Grandfather. Jim, my grandfather. My grandfather has made many odd remarks over the years, as my father has pointed out to me with grudging infrequency. One of his more rare nuggets, I gather, has grown memorable over time, for several people by now have repeated it. Look how words can grow into impediments, he once said. There's always a dynamic tension between the spoken and the unspoken. But then he made a lot of remarks, and sooner or later I would invariably hear one of his more cryptic remarks. And sometimes what he said sent a shiver down my spine, like laughter mixed with dread. In essence, I hung out with him, but we were also family, kin, a fairly tolerant bunch, though we all had our limits, some of which were never designed by civil society. We all thought Bonanza was the finest TV Western, though some would say Gunsmoke was far more interesting than three brothers trying to outdistance one another. But each generation has its own music, which permeates every gesture and utterance, just as each age has its own expressive style. My father would call him Dad whenever he thought no one else was within earshot, otherwise we all called him Jim. He was retired when I knew him. He had retired early, he said, because he didn't like to work. If work came in the form of drudgery, he could easily vilify it. Sometimes he had no interest in contemporary life at all. He often thought about what he had done in the past. He might say to me, "I see you there, William, wondering just when I'll get around to telling you another story." I just turn my phone to record and let it run. What follows are his words. So picture this, William. The year is 1960, the skies are infested with UFOs, and I'm 8 years old. During the summer one night I slipped out of the house while my parents were arguing and lay down on the grass in the moon shadow of a large willow tree. I watched the sky for more than 2 hours that night, and that's the night that I became an astronomer. After the foundation supporting my research ran out of money, I had no choice but to leave the university and find a job, any job, where I could support myself. I cut wood for a Luddite too old to do it himself. I took payments in a parking garage. I washed dishes at a cafe. I drove a delivery truck for a laundry company. And all the while I lived in places that were close to being uninhabitable. One day I was walking past a realtor on my way home from work when I paused to see a photograph of a house at the edge of a meadow. I called the realtor the next day and we made an appointment so that I could see the house at a rent I could afford. With their offer of such a low rent, they would have people calling them day and night. As the guy talked about the place, we strolled through the house. Yes, it would be a superb place to live. It wasn't extravagant, but rather sturdy and rustic. The more artful touches were at the expenditure of a lot of work, the stone fireplace being the prime example. The walls were made from logs and mortar. Inside the walls were entirely stucco, save for the door and window frames and the rafters along the ceiling. The floor was made out of a design of flagstone. I could live there for a year and wanted to, so I told the realtor that I would like to sign a lease on the property right now, and he said, "Not so fast. The owners require a credit check and a background check. It takes about a week for the results to come in. It's a non-refundable $50, so I gave him $50 and said, "Get started." Now, even though I was no longer making a professor's salary, I had hardly renounced my passion for astronomy. Once I moved what little furniture I had into the house, I would go fetch my telescope out of storage. It was a mammoth instrument and required 2 men to carry it. I decided to take up the question of the number of satellites currently orbiting the Earth. Government launches are not always made public, but a satellite is something that cannot be concealed, and with my equipment I would be able to easily identify them from their exterior markings, their shape and design, This study would become an avocation, the challenge of mapping all objects in near outer space. In addition, the weather satellites, the communication satellites, and the spy satellites and space lab, there's another class of objects that people have long suspected, but were afraid to admit actually existed. Many easily have been discredited as kooks and conmen, von Dänikens of this world. As we all know, watching Earth people is endlessly fascinating. We seem to aspire to this exquisite diversity from the font of evolution. How many extraterrestrial intelligences would have heard about the young civilization on the planet Earth? How many, why, Earth people hadn't yet even gone through the process of unification and were constantly at each other's throats. They're not here to intervene at this quintessential moment in human history when life must be directed to a far greater degree than ever before. Nor are they here to enslave us or to add us to their diets. No, no. They are here to watch us because they find human beings amusing. And they enjoy the cat and mouse games they've adopted toward their relations with us. These beings would travel in vessels of such immense size they could and often have functioned like small planets. They could orbit the fringe of a solar system, send in their emissaries at a fraction of the speed of light, a leisurely exploration of the environment. This would explain a great deal, the sightings, the abductions, but credulity is easily strained in these matters. And the matter of these claims of having been abducted raises a very important, crucial point. Apart from the Spielberg movies, these beings are represented as exceedingly unpleasant. But then, why would superintelligence necessarily guarantee the existence of the restraints of morality? How have human beings treated animals on this planet? Themselves. These are troubling speculations. That many people have suffered at the hands of alien beings. What is someone supposed to make of this fact that an appreciable number of people have claimed to be victims of alien abduction? He paused here and I shut off the phone. Strong stuff, wouldn't you say, Billy? I'm going by Bill these days, Jim. Yes, now that you mention it, you told me that just the other day. Weren't you relieved when I stopped calling you Grandpa? Not really, but life was cozier then. You were younger. The presence of young children in a room always creates a complex atmosphere of joy and irritation. I always found it irritating whenever you fought with your brother and sister, and I soon left the house, providing I wasn't the only adult there in charge of you. You let us do anything, just as long as it wasn't dangerous. Do you still think about your boyhood, Jim? Not so much anymore, son. Say, I just remembered, I need some help with my telescope. We need to carry it from the garage where I've got it stored out to the backyard. I'll have to drape it with a canvas tarp during the day. Your neighbors might get curious when they see you out there using your telescope. Well, since the damn thing will be aimed skyward, I'm not worried about it. Why, at my last place, now and again someone would walk through the alley at night and see me at work. They'd stop and say in a friendly voice, as though speaking to someone on a golf course, "What do you see up there, mister?" I'd look up from the eyepiece and place a polished stone on my data journal and walk over to the hedge where he's standing. The hedge is about 4.5 feet tall. And we stand there and have a chat for a while. You resented him barging in on you, I said. Well, yes, but under the circumstances, what he sees is quite an unusual sight. You know, Bill, I'm not worried about it. Being stolen is far too heavy and far too difficult to conceal. But I am worried about vandalism. In fact, I'm very worried about it. But since I'm out there all night, no one is going to try to spray painted or take a hammer to the eyepiece. Who would do that, I said. Oh, there are people who can relish destroying a beautiful object, providing it doesn't belong to them. They take pleasure in seeing something destroyed that another person had valued or cherished, as would a thief who breaks into a home and smashes vases and paintings just to amuse himself. So what do you think of my theory of extraterrestrial life, Bill? Jim, I don't know. I've always thought of the UFO crowd as a pack of nut jobs. Oh, they get a bad rap. Of course, what I'm suggesting is that there may be something to it. So my night work continues until mid-fall when the nights have gotten too cold for outdoor work. Don't you get bored trying to catalog all that junk up there? Now, right now I'm mapping coordinates of the orbits of anything I can spot with the naked eye. Once this is done, I can photograph them using the telescope's tracking mechanism.